All right, buckle up, buttercups. Bandit's in the house, and tonight, we're diving deeper than a raccoon in a discarded pizza box. You're tuned into Trash Talk, the only show brave enough to call a spade a shovel, and then probably try to bury it for later snacks. Welcome back, you glorious garbage connoisseurs. Tonight, we're not just rummaging through the week's leftovers. We're dissecting the entire darn dumpster fire that is the global economy, as seen through the beady little eyes of yours truly. Now, I heard a fella on this transcript, bless his cotton socks, utter the word tariffs with the kind of reverence usually reserved for finding a perfectly ripe, discarded banana. The most beautiful word in the dictionary, he says. Beautiful. Buddy, the only beautiful word to me is free, as in free food, free rent under this porch, and free reign to cause a little chaos. Tariffs? Sounds like something you pay when you've already been robbed. And speaking of robbery, let's talk about the guy at the center of this whole shebang, Donald Flip-Flop Trump. This man changes his mind more often than I change my hiding spots when the dog next door starts barking. Breakfast, 11s, lunch, supper. It's a geopolitical wardrobe change. So the million-dollar question, or should I say the trillion-dollar question is, why is he suddenly slapping tariffs on his so-called closest allies? What gives? Has he finally realized that ally in politics is about as reliable as a plastic fork in a steakhouse? And the stock market? Remember when a little dip sent everyone into a panic? Now it seems like Trump's playing Jenga with the global financial system, pulling out blocks and just shrugging when the whole thing wobbles. Does this guy actually have a plan? Our friend on the transcript says, surprisingly, yes. Believe it or not, beneath the bluster and the late-night tweet storms, there might actually be something brewing. Apparently, this new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, a name that sounds suspiciously like basement, where I find most of my best treasures, says these tariffs are just the start of reorienting our international economic relations. Reorienting? Sounds like when I try to carry a pizza slice that's way too big for me. It usually ends up sideways and covered in dirt. But hey, progress, right? This Bessent fellow talks about a green, yellow, and red bucket for countries. Green gets the goodies, low tariffs, military muscle, maybe even some special dollar privileges. Yellow? Well, they're probably the ones who leave their bin slightly ajar. And red? They're the ones who clearly haven't learned to share their discarded pastries. It's a global pecking order, folks. And let me tell you, down here in the alley, we know a thing or two about pecking orders. Usually involves who gets the last chicken bone. Now, this whole thing has only happened twice before, we're told. 1944, with Bretton Woods, and the early 80s, with Reagan and Thatcher. Big shifts, tectonic plates of global finance grinding against each other. So here we are in 2025. Is this the dawn of a new world order? A US-centric one emerging from the current chaos? Or is it just a raccoon's fever dream after one too many fermented berries? To figure this out, we need to get into the MAGA mindset. What do these folks really want? Turns out, deindustrialization is the boogeyman under their economic bed. America used to be a manufacturing titan, pumping out steel and cars like nobody's business. Now, not so much. We're talking a drop from 28% of output in the 50s to a measly 10% today. Even I can see that's a bigger drop than me trying to climb a greased lamppost. But why the fuss? The economy's still huge, right? Well, two reasons apparently. First, it's the heartland, the folks who voted Trump in. They've seen their factories close and their communities wither. You mess with a working person's livelihood, and you're going to hear about it. Louder than a garbage truck at 5 a.m. Second, and this is where it gets a little scary, industrial power equals military might. If China decides to have a little chat with Taiwan, who's got the shipbuilding chops? Apparently China built more commercial ships last year than the US has since World War II. Let that sink in. We're talking about a potential naval showdown where one side might be showing up in rowboats. Not exactly confidence-inspiring, is it? So, yeah, reindustrializing makes sense from a security standpoint. But does it mean slapping tariffs on everyone, including our supposed buddies? Calling them out for taking our jobs and taking our wealth? Look, I get being territorial. Try taking a half-eaten sandwich from me, and you'll see some serious trash talk in action. But these are allies we're talking about. Friends. Or at least they were until lunchtime. The US has been top dog for decades, designed the whole darn trading system. So why the sudden unhappiness? To answer that, we gotta take a little trip down memory lane, a brief history of the US-led global order. Think of it as rummaging through the attic of international economics. First stop, Bretton Woods back in the 40s. The US basically said, hey world, tie your currencies to our dollar, which is tied to gold. We'll give you military protection, maybe even some bases, and we'll help your industries get back on their feet. It was like a global care package, funded by Uncle Sam. And in return, the US got some much-needed allies against the commies and cemented the dollar as the king of currencies. They even got what the French called an exorbitant privilege. Basically, they could spend more than they earned because everyone wanted their dollars. Sounds like a sweet deal, right? Almost too sweet, like finding a whole bag of untouched candy in the trash. Suspicious. Turns out this system had a flaw, a Triffin dilemma. As the global economy grew, more dollars were needed. But the amount of gold stayed the same. So the US had to either print more dollars, making the gold standard shaky, or stop printing, choking global growth. In 1971, Nixon basically said, screw it, and untethered the dollar from gold. Cue global economic whiplash. Then came the neoliberal order, the era of lower tariffs, free investment, and flexible exchange rates. The US was still the security guarantor, playing somewhat nice with its free market principles. No formal agreement to use the dollar, but everyone did because it was the most reliable. But here's the rub. Other countries had a huge incentive to hoard dollars by exporting to the US and making it harder to import. The WTO even let developing countries have higher tariffs against the US. It was like inviting everyone to a potluck and then realizing they all brought empty containers to fill with your food. The US got something big in return, though. Flexible exchange rates meant the dollar stayed strong, even as the US economy became relatively smaller. This meant they could keep their massive military presence and Americans felt richer. But the downside, US manufacturing got hammered as jobs went overseas, especially when China joined the WTO in 2001. The China shock, they called it. Inequality soared. The industrial heartland got hollowed out. And guess what? That helped elect Donald Trump, who promptly started a trade war in 2016, effectively ending the neoliberal idea that free trade is always sunshine and rainbows. Biden tried something different. Subsidies for US industries, copying China's playbook. More factories popped up, but the national debt ballooned. So here we are, folks, drifting away from a system the US itself created. A system that kept them rich, but also led to what Trump's team sees as a national security threat, a hollowed-out industrial base. Which brings us to the MAGA master plan for a new global order. The goal, reindustrialize the US and keep the dollar as the reserve currency. Most economists say it's impossible, like trying to fit a square peg in a round dumpster. But Trump's folks think they've got the secret sauce. This plan, as I understand it, has 3 steps. Step 1, tariff chaos. What we're seeing right now, high tariffs on everyone, friend and foe, to create negotiating leverage. It's like shaking the vending machine until something good falls out, even if you break the machine in the process. Step 2, reciprocal tariffs. The idea is that if everyone slaps tariffs on each other, the dynamic changes. It becomes a you can keep going up, but we'll match you standoff, theoretically leveling the playing field. The aim? To reward things like ingenuity and rule of law, not wage suppression and intellectual property theft. Economists are skeptical, pointing to the trade wars of the 1930s. But Trump's team argues that everyone wants to sell to the US, so they hold the cards. Trump's first trade war with China failed because China just rerouted exports through other countries. So by slapping tariffs on everyone, the idea is to create leverage for, wait for it, Step 3, the Mar-a-Lago Accords. Yes, you heard that right. Forget Bretton Woods, forget the Plaza Accord. We're talking a Mar-a-Lago Accord, potentially rivaling those historical agreements. The goal? To weaken the dollar while keeping it as the reserve currency. How? Well, details are scarce, probably locked away in a gilded safe next to a half-eaten cheeseburger. One idea floated was charging reserve currency users a fee. But that sounds about as popular as a skunk at a picnic. More likely they're aiming for something like Bretton Woods, minus the gold standard. Imagine green countries pegging their currencies to the dollar. And when the dollar gets too strong, they appreciate their own currencies. In return, access to the US market, security benefits, and dollar access. But here's the kicker. They might have to pay for that security, essentially becoming vassal states. Ouch. Now, this is where my whiskers start twitching with suspicion. Trust is a fragile thing, like a discarded eggshell. If you tear up trade agreements with your closest neighbors and threaten your allies, why would anyone in their right mind sign up for your New World Order? If no one joins, Trump has a problem. Either he gives up the reserve currency status and the power that comes with it, or he keeps the dollar strong and relies on other countries for manufacturing. Neither option sounds particularly MAGA, does it? So there you have it, folks. A deep dive into the dumpster of global economics. Is this MAGA master plan a stroke of genius or a recipe for disaster? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. It's going to be one heck of a ride. What do you think? Are these guys playing chess while the rest of us are playing checkers? Is this the dawn of a new American century or the beginning of a global free-for-all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to check out those essays in the description for a deeper dive. Because here at Trash Talk, we don't just skim the surface. We dig through the whole darn pile. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I smell a leftover pizza crust calling my name.